I'm the bad guy. Duh.
Hello, everybody, and I am back here in the fandom zone, and welcome to the fandom basement. Why am I in the basement? Probably it's because I'm discussing Birds of Prey. Okay, so how am I going to begin this? Let's start with first off how I do this. I'm going to give you an overview, the pros, the cons, what I like, what I didn't like, and there may be minor spoilers. And by minor spoilers, I mean that I might actually highlight stuff you saw in the trailer but give it better context because it'll explain why I like a certain thing and why I don't. And with this movie, I need to point out some things because this is a weird movie. This is a really weird movie. So, then I'm going to do my Zod approves, Zod disapproves, and my number system from 1 to 10. 1 being the worst movie ever made, and 10 being the best thing your Earth has ever produced. So let's get started. Birds of Prey is a 2020 film by Cathy Yan. It stars Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. It stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead as the Huntress, Gina Smollett as Laura Lance, Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya, Chris Messina as Victor Zsasz, and Ian McGregor as Black Mask. So, before I really break down my pros and cons, this is a tough one because there is somewhat some feminist things that you may be able to pick out from this movie, but large in part, this is Captain Marvel marketing. It is not feminist propaganda, as people who have not seen this movie will tell you. I've seen the film. It's hard to explain. It falls in that weird gray area. So now we've got to go to what the film is actually about. And here's where my review is tough to do, because I like a lot of aspects of this film as a fan of DC and the direction they took the characters. However, also as a movie reviewer, there are a gross amount of issues with this film. So, Birds of Prey is about basically Harley Quinn narrating the tale of how she is essentially broken off from the Joker, and she's down and out, and her getting this group of people together through a situation that happens. A diamond is stolen by Cassandra, and this diamond contains information within the diamond which she did not know about and thought it was just a normal diamond, and it has a microchip in it, which our main protagonist, Black Mask, is trying to get back. I think his name is Roman. For the life of me, I can't say the last name. I think it's Samson or Simon or something like that, but I'm just going to call him Black Mask for the purpose of this review. So, and okay, so let me just, that's pretty much the basis. There's a lot more to it, but let me just start with my pros here. The film is choreographed by Chad Stahelski, and if you don't know who that is, he did John Wick. So when they make the comparisons of John Wick, it pisses me off because they say it's got better fight scenes, but in all actuality, Chad Stahelski actually came in and cleaned up some of the fight scenes because the original person who produced it, they looked god-awful apparently. So he came in and he touched up some of the fight scene work, and you could see where certain fight scenes are pulled off better than others. So, Chad, once again, you're a genius, but this is not John Wick. But if you feel like some of the fights are something you'd see in John Wick, it's probably because Chad Stahelski came in and cleaned up some of the scenes that were lacking. So, bones break effectively, and the fighting is pretty impressive. Now, some of the things they explain to how the women can do the things that they do make sense within the canon of DC. You have the Huntress, who they follow her backstory very closely. She had her family killed by a bunch of gangsters, and she seeks her revenge. She is known as the Crossbow Hunter and later becomes the Huntress. Diana Lance, she becomes the Black Canary. There's a backstory there. I'm trying not to really get into spoiler territory, but it does something that Suicide Squad does where it will cut in between when they introduce a character and it'll go into their backstory and then cut back. And now the storytelling is a pro and a con. When Margot Robbie is narrating, it's actually pretty quirky and very funny. There's a lot of funny dialogue within it. And the stuff I clipped, they felt just to push what they thought this was going to be. But actually, her narration is pretty solid and explains things fairly well. The issue within the narration is the fact of how they do these cuts between explaining the different birds of prey. It's very jarring and it's hard to follow. And also, they try to do a Quentin Tarantino-esque thing with some but not complete success where they tell the story backwards. So it starts at the middle and then goes back to the beginning with Harley Quinn narrating. There's particular scenes that are pretty funny within the movie. But for this, I really got to break down to you guys the characters because this is where this movie excels and fails at the exact same time. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, always good. I mean, honestly, she does a really, really good job. I thought it was going to be a lot of feminist propaganda with her scene and breaking up with Joker, but it was kind of just a hilarious woman breaks up with guy and the cycles they go through. So she goes through the stages of grief and narrates this, and it's fucking hilarious. It really is funny. There's literally a part where Harley Quinn is eating Haagen-Dazs. Her makeup is running. She is like visibly like just torn up, and then she goes clubbing and tries to drink and causes a ruckus and is using the Joker's name to keep herself safe. And I like the fact that the movie does show her hiding behind the Joker's name, and part of her arc is her coming into her own and establishing herself, which the DC cartoon, the animation does, and I feel like they took cues from that. Now, her character is pretty solid, but very over the top. And the problem with her narration, which is supposed to be done on purpose, but kind of comes off choppy at points, is the fact that it's narrated by a crazy person. And the director doesn't have the skill that Todd Phillips has in trying to set up this, maybe a scene is real, maybe it isn't. They're too blunt with their storytelling. And that affects the overall narrative of what they're trying to set up with how Harley Quinn is telling the story. Also, there's a lot of rips from Deadpool and his fourth wall breaking narrations that they rip off a lot here. And I don't mind it because Harley Quinn is that kind of character, but it does kind of have that snatched feeling. Now, I'm going in order of importance. Huntress is probably the only other fleshed out character played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She starts off at one place, and then it's revealed that pretty awesomely, Black Mass art and hers are probably the most tied to. She's probably the second most developed character in the sense that a lot of the story is about her, and if you know the story of the Huntress, then you know how that story goes. The only difference is they swap how it happens, so it's more she's hunting specific people that weren't necessarily in the CW Arrowverse, if you come from that, or wasn't hinted in the comics. And I didn't mind the swap because it fit the story. So it was an overall good story choice, and it gave her a lot of purpose to be in the narration. So kudos. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead is actually really good. She's very good. She delivers her lines well. She's really sassy and at the same time kind of serious. Now, Laura Lance. Why can't they? why can't they ever get Laura Lance right? This is the second iteration that's annoying. Like, Laura Lance has this stigma where her character is just god awful annoying. And this movie, oh, this bitch, like, just annoying. Her character is annoying. The siren scream is taken in a different direction that I don't particularly care for. I liked the CW's explanation, but I can't understand why they did it a different way in this, and it ties her into the Flash's universe. And I'll leave it at that without spoiling it. But I'm very on the fence how I feel. But her portrayal of Laura Lance is very flat, uninspiring kind of nonsense. Now, Renee Montoya. She's a cop that chases Harley Quinn. She is also hinted to as being the third member of Birds of Prey. I can't for the life of me remember the third Birds of Prey. And I gotta say, her and the Siren are the least used. Like, her and Laura Lance's character have really nothing to do until the latter half of the movie. Renee's probably a little bit more important because she's playing the cop angle, but it's so forced in this role, and it's like there's really nothing much for her to do. Huntress and Harley Quinn, in my mind, and then Cassandra really steal the show for this because most of the story is focused on those three characters. And I don't know. So, it's a narrative mess trying to bring these characters together. Now, some of the high points, and I wrote them down here on my list right here. She has the hyena. She doesn't have two, but she has one. And Harley Quinn gets her hyena, and it's a way for her to get over Joker. And she hilariously names the hyena Bruce. And I thought that was hilarious. I can't for the life of me remember their names in the comics, but it was really funny, and she loves this hyena Bruce. So my problem and why this is a con is because Bruce doesn't get a lot of screen time, and I wish they utilized Bruce a little bit more because her relationship with this hyena is hilarious. It is hilarious. Black Mask, or Roman, Ian McGregor is both a pro and a con. He has a very over-the-top performance. He also has to give a hint of being bisexual. And this is handled very, very in your face. And this is where I mean where there's politics and there isn't, because to convey that he likes men, there's certain mannerisms he does, like he goes, hey, and stuff. And on the one hand, Ewan does a good job with the sadistic side of Black Mask. Very good. Better than I thought it was going to be. There's quite a bit of... There's a whole, like, thing that happens that I don't want to spoil. But he's a sadistic bastard and narcissistic, very much like the character. And he even dons the mask for a particular reason that I won't get into either. And Ewan nails that part very well. The other issue, though, is that at times it's too over the top. He's really, like, over the top with certain lines. Although there's a funny scene in particular, and you've seen it in the trailers, where he has Harley Quinn tied up to a chair, and he has Zsasz kind of mess around with her with a knife, and Harley legitimately looks nervous and very quickly makes a deal which moves the story. And I like the fact that he is able to intimidate this female. It shows a balance. But I mean, what makes the scene funny is he makes a reference to what he's going to do to her, just like every, common villain, and then he sits down with a bucket of popcorn and starts eating it, and it is fucking hilarious. Like, not gonna lie, I laughed. So this movie has a lot of laughs. There's also a thing, and you guys have seen it in the previews, I'm not spoiling anything, where they're being shot at this warehouse, and you see him hiding behind a crate. There's a crap load of coke. The coke gets shot, and she goes into this trip, and Harley Quinn's mind is kind of displayed, and at some points it's good, and some points it's really weird and out of place within the story. Like, in this scene, it was good because you see her take on all these guys with automatic machine guns, and you say, how can she do that? Well, if you watch Scarface, when he was coked out, he wasn't being hurt by bullets and things like that. You just don't care. For her, it, like, heightened her senses, and she, like, slows down. And, like, she's almost tripping fighting these guys. So she's seeing it in slow motion, then they speed the camera up, and we see it quickly. So she's actually moving in real time, but when you cut back to how she sees it, it's slowed down because she's high. So there's a lot of... Overall, what do I think? This is a mixed bag, so the scenes are good at certain points, and they're not. The action is solid, and bones break. There's some really violent, like, very violent scenes, so it does deserve its R rating. But yet some are very fantastic, especially Black Mask. The thing that happens to that character, I don't know how I feel about that, and I think that within itself is a statement. So what do I think? I think that this is another movie that's going to be subjective like Suicide Squad. The difference is, from Suicide Squad, was Enchantress was a terrible villain, and Joker was not even featured in the film. So I think that in this respect, the villain is highlighted. He moves the story along. And I think that the Birds of Prey were very half-assed done. Some of them, you get a really good backstory, and then two of them, it's just pointless. And I think it would have served better to have them separated. You could have actually essentially done this with all of Harley Quinn. I do agree with an odd comment that I heard, that it is choppy in the beginning. It does come together at the ending. The problem with that is the narrative is so skew that if you are not really paying attention to this movie, if you get up to go to the bathroom or get some popcorn, you are going to be completely lost, because the scenes don't have any coherency until you get to near the end of the movie. Then everything comes together, and all of the characters essentially go their own way and do things that pertain to the title of the film. And I'm really struggling without giving it away. And this is where I struggle, because the movie does have a lot more coherency than Suicide Squad. It is actually very funny. It knows what it is, and I feel like it plays to the fact that it knows it's over-the-top, crazy action, and it doesn't try to really break out of that box. It keeps itself there. And when it does do over-the-top, crazy violence, some parts work and some parts don't. And this is where I feel this writer had some things that may have been in this movie because of how choppy it is. I feel like in the editing process, they cut certain scenes that aren't in this movie. There are certain things that I feel and that you can visibly feel were supposed to be in there that were cut out at the last minute. I think this might have been towards that feminist angle that we've been hearing about. But some things have a choppy flow. But the overall movie at the end pulls itself together and has a pretty decent, coherent story. And it does set things up for the future. It sets up things with Birds of Prey. And it sets up something with the new Batman. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but stay for the post-credit scene. It's worth it. And it's actually kind of funny and kind of pissed me off at the same time. And if you stay, you'll see what I mean. Overall, what do I think? I think that a lot of YouTubers are going to come out and talk about how misogynist this is and how blah, 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 this and that. But I honestly don't think I caught as much misogyny as the market would have you think. I think this is a Captain Marvel situation where they specifically marketed that. And if you're really looking, you can pull that from it. But I think that they did some edits and rewrites within this story that keep it going full woke, in a sense, woke. And I just think that they had an idea where they wanted to go with it, and the ending was always there. It was just getting there. There may have been stuff in between, and as they tested it and leaked stuff out and things like that, and people were pissy, I think that, honestly, they did some reshoots and edits really quick, or they edited things out, like they did with Captain Marvel, maybe cut some scenes, and it does add to the choppiness of this film. So overall, my hardest thing that I had to do, and this was hard for me to rate, because as a fan of DC, and the fact that this movie does do certain backstories actually pretty well, and then it does some really terrible, I had a hard time rating this, and I still struggle with the rating. But I'm going to say, for me, this was not the worst I've seen. This is not a Captain Marvel. I was at least entertained, and the middle part has a little bit of a slowdown, but for the most part, it tells a story. It gets from point A to point B. There's action, there's violence, and there's really some really good fight scenes in it, and then some really terrible ones. So overall, Zsasz approves, but it's going to be for a certain audience, and I predict it's going to be a very contentious film. A lot of people are not going to like this movie. A lot of people are going to look for those angles, and if you look hard enough, you will probably find them. There is some things that are pretty blatant, and others that are very subtle. There's a little bit of messaging, but if you're just going there for some action, really funny dialogue, some pretty funny moments, I think this will entertain most people. Now, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. I would rate this slightly higher than the normal fare. But this is not a 7 or an 8 or even a 9. I mean, there is some glaring issues within the writing of this film. There are some things that are just, they don't gel well. And I feel like if they took their time and they fleshed out more characters or separated the Birds of Prey from Harley Quinn, I mean, this could work as either movie. Quite honestly, you don't need 2 of these Birds of Prey, which is kind of weird because it's the Birds of Prey. And literally, if you've got rid of Laura and you got rid of Renee, Laura only has one little scene that she helps out with. You can sub that in. And Renee was just annoying and could be any cop. So how that they tie it in at the end, and it just felt very shoehorned in. But all in all, the main players was Harley Quinn, the Huntress, and Cassandra, and that's pretty much it. And then Ian McGregor. Also, I was gathering the vibe of most of the males are villains, so that's there. But it's not how they're villains, but how they're portrayed is kind of over the top and funny. Like, really hilarious. And actually likable. Like, I think they were going for this, they're narcissistic and evil, but I actually enjoyed them. I enjoyed every minute that Ian McGregor and the dude who plays Victor Zsasz was on the screen. They were very charismatic in their roles. So, overall, I'm going to give this a 6. And I do approve of you at least giving this a watch. Look, nothing else is coming out. And I think that this isn't the worst propaganda film. This is not a Ghostbusters 2016. I mean, it is what it is. The politics are still going to be there, but, you know, it's contained in a sense. If you're looking for it, you're going to find it. If you're just looking for a very violent, somewhat origin story on the Birds of Prey, then this would be the movie for you. If you're a huge fan of the Huntress, you have a lot to love. If you love Harley Quinn, you get a lot of her. If you like Black Mask, you get a lot of him. But if you're looking for an origin story, then this does not do much justice in the way of the origins for most of these characters. So, anyways, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you're excited or you got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And should you watch this later, if you see the film, tell me what you think of the movie. And as always, remember the one and only rule here in the glorious dungeon of General Zod: kneel before Zod.
I'm the bad guy. Duh.